Hello everybody, I'm going to talk a little bit about Steiner and the sun that's in the sky, the great big supposedly orange orb that is looking down upon us all and spraying us with its solar rays. So sometimes it looks a bit white these days, but I want to read a little bit from Steiner. So I'm going to just read from this chapter of about the minerals and their solar connections. So this is Steiner. Now, there are spirits of wisdom active on the sun who have gone through their complete normal process of evolution. Their work has been described as astrally upon the mineral, but certain of the spirits of wisdom have become luciferic. We have designated this becoming luciferic of certain spiritual beings of a hierarchy as a sort of rebellion in the cosmos. This rebellion comes about because certain spirits, having reached a given stage in their hierarchy, resist their brethren and work against them, work in an opposite direction. This opposition comes about simply because they do not wish to go through the evolution which the others do, so they simply remain behind at an earlier stage, just as we know in our own souls that we wish to progress, yet the ideas and habits we have acquired will not allow us to do so because they wish to remain as a permanence. Our habits are often rebels against what we have acquired in a new epoch of life. In like manner, the spiritual beings who remain behind at an earlier stage are rebels in the cosmos. So it's part of my continuing own ideas and studies is we're supposed to be evolving as human beings, evolving and going on to the next stage. And as everything else is, every plant, mineral, the waters, the airs, well, maybe not the waters and the airs, but everything's trying to evolve and move up the hierarchy, which is why in Steiner's cosmology there's all the different stages of the planets evolving, the angels evolving, the humans supposedly evolving. But we all need to do this as a group consciousness, and I'm hoping something that is happening. I like to see that more and more people seem to be becoming aware of this kind of thing, but many people have no idea of this kind of teaching, or whether this is even an opportunity for us as humans on this planet to go ahead with ourselves. Many people just want to happily live their lives day by day, materialistically, and not interested in anything else, with no idea of how to make themselves a better person, a better human. And this is something that's taught a lot in the Hermetic writings and the Hermetic teachings of the old schools. It used to be known as mystery schools, but I believe it's all been revealed in the last 100 years or so, because this is a big chance for humanity to evolve to the next stage. But do people want to do it? Are people ready to move on to whatever's next? And I know people don't like change. I myself quite embrace change. I quite like the challenge of things changing and ready for the new things. Most times change turns out to be for the better anyway, though maybe at first it seems a bit daunting or a bit like, oh, we get too comfortable in our ways, and then we become lazy animals. And without change, how do we progress? And okay, there can also be change in a negative way or in the wrong way, which I think is what Steiner might be going on about with the luciferic beings. They don't necessarily want to be part of the cosmic evolution, so they will do everything they can to try and stop an evolution, and try to make things stay stagnant, or perhaps create it into their own style of what they want the world to be, these luciferic beings, which you can find in many of Steiner's books and other places, of how we must try not to be taken in by the negative side. We must be awake enough to hopefully evolve onwards and upwards to a better person. But one bit I found quite interesting was about the sun. Now, I've always believed that we should be following the solar path. There seems to be two paths offered to us, the solar or the lunar. Lunar seems quite illusory, imaginative, obviously a bit dark because it's in the night time, but the lunar light, when it does fall down upon us, is of course the sun being reflected. And when there is no light on the moon, that's no sun being put onto the moon, and we have the dark side of the moon, the new moon. And as it comes around again and the sun and the moon start aligning again on the planet, the sun starts lighting up the moon again. and till we get to the full moon. Well, I'm sure you all know how a moon cycle works. But I just wanted to read this bit about the sun. The Luciferic spirits, the spirits of wisdom of the second hierarchy, who have not gone through their development with the rest. So these are the ones that Steiner was talking about earlier that are opposing evolution. Instead of sending astral streams from the sun to the mineral, send etheric streams to the earth. This resulted in a certain basic substance being formed, which received its inner being, not from the planets directly, but directly from the sun. And this mineral is gold. Gold is that luciferic mineral which, as regards its inner being, is not influenced etherically by the planets, but by the sun. Hence, the occultist has allotted gold to the sun. In a certain sense, this mineral is therefore somewhat different from other metals, and the gold is different from other metals. It does not rust, which is why it's seen as the most precious metal, because it does not rust. It stays pure, polished. Well, maybe not polished if you find it from the ground, but it keeps its attributes. So as we're trying to develop ourselves into better people and use the solar power and become gold-like, this is why we want to try and develop ourselves into the next stage of becoming like gold, of uncorruptible. We want to be not corrupted by the luciferic, the aramanic forces. We want to instead feel the solar power of the divine source, the angels, or whatever you want to believe in, that are of the good side, that are here to help us move onwards with our evolution, whatever that's going to be. But surely if we're going upwards to the divine, then it's to a better state of humanity. And maybe that's the whole point of our lives on this earth, is to develop ourselves to become the best possible human that we can be. Anyway, thank you. Hello everybody, I'm here to speak more about Steiner and his Apocalypse for the Clergy. So I'm going to start with reading from lecture 1 a little bit, called The Fathers. Refers to the father grade of initiation, and this name is still given to priests in many confessions today, Pater. Now, when a priest carried out a transubstantiation in his earth or rock temple, he experienced the union of his physical organism with the whole earth. This is why they had the temple underground or in rock. Today, we can also feel united with the surrounding cosmos in our ordinary earthly consciousness as we live between birth and death. And this has been the case during the whole time that mankind has been evolving on Earth. So what he's saying here is, back in the past, the priests, I suppose, you know, like the wise man, the cunning folk, possibly the shaman, would be trying to connect with the divine by going down into a cave or to be part of a rock temple. And I like rocks and stones, as many of you will know from my channel. I love my standing stone circles and my megaliths. But I wonder if in these stones is quartz and crystal. And I've discussed this kind of thing before, of quartz and crystal. Seems very special, has special energies in it. And many of you probably know about all the I'm going to probably say it wrong, the pits electricity from when you crush a crystal or put weight upon it, it creates a magnetic energy or electromagnetic energy. So maybe being in these stone temples with all this quartz inside the stones, which I'm assuming, okay, now Steiner's not saying that's in these stone temples, that is something I am assuming. But I think they probably understood how quartz worked and probably used to put yourself into a certain state, not necessarily a trance, or maybe it was a trance, but by being in a enclosed space, maybe of a cave or a stone temple, just yourself and that quartz and stone, working on yourself and feeling the energies from then and sending the energies out, speaking, chanting mantras would have some kind of reverberation that would affect the quartz. Maybe that quartz would then send the energy on to the divine. I'm not sure, but I feel that's what Steiner's trying to say is that from being in them kind of centers, they were, these fathers, these priests, these paters, these old ancient cunning folk were using that energy or taking in that energy to work with, to, as he says here, transubstantiation. So he's feeling the energies coming in, working upon himself, whether it's coming through from the, well, hopefully from the God, and then they can transubstantiate it inside themselves, so that they then, when they're giving out back to the people who are listening to them or observing them to learn, to get their sustenance from them in that kind of way, whether it's a prayer, a sermon, you know, healing, dancing, those people are getting that full impact from that priest. He then goes on to talk about breathing exercises and things like that, which again are important. But what he was mainly saying at the end of this is, today we can also feel united with the surrounding cosmos in our ordinary earthly consciousness as we live between birth and death. So in the ancient days, the priests, the paters, the fathers were going to get it from being in them temples and connecting with the cosmos, the consciousness of the cosmos. But he's now saying, Steiner's saying, we're doing this every day ourselves. We can, if we work upon ourselves with it. And he then goes on later to say in this same chapter, chapter 1 of the clergy, of Apocalypse for the Clergy. So he's talking about the fathers having that transubstantiation. The currents are coming down and then flowing back upwards. So they're uniting with the earth and with the divine. And then currents are, well, he says here, I'll read this bit. He, the priest, had become united with the earth, and he united what he had prepared at the altar with his body, with currents that belong to both the earth and his body, and with divine things on the earth, which are a reflection of the universe. He knew that he was united with the outside universe. He knew that the meal which he had taken in this way was a meal which his cosmic man had completed. He felt that his divine man arose through what streamed into the current which went upwards and the one which went downwards, and that it could be a companion of the gods who had descended. So where Steiner's talking here about, in the olden days, the gods would come in, or their companions or their messengers, work with the person, the priest, the father, the shaman, to pass on the divine message, or get them to connect with the divine, which would then be that shaman, priest, cunning folk would then pass that on to the people, the general people. I want to say the average people, but it's a bit rude. But you know, the people that aren't the who are attending the sermons, so that they are then feeling that they're being given that energy, that process that's coming through the priest from the divine, whether it's their messenger or not. Because these lectures, Steiner's trying to teach the priests of the, well, it's the 20th century, but it's still relevant for today, that priests must really connect with the divine when they're preaching or giving their sermons or doing their healings, and not just give out their prayers and sermons willy-nilly. They should be inspired by the divine, not themselves or their own egos, which we see a lot of these days, especially the ones that are asking for money. Come and join my channel and, you know, listen to me sermon and then donate, you know, loads of money so that I can go and buy a nice house. Those aren't the priests you want to be listening to, which I'm sure you're not. So he's saying about the divine man arose through what streamed into the current, which went upwards and one went downwards, and that it will be a companion of the gods. So it's a two-way thing. He felt that the gods had transformed him into a divine human being in his physical body. That is, he felt that he had been transubstantiated. And at this moment, he could say from the depths of his heart, now I am not the one who walks around in the physical world. I am he in whom the descended God lives. I am he whose name includes all sounds, and who was at the beginning, is in the middle, and will be at the end. I am Alpha and Omega. And that's what we all have the opportunity to do now. We don't need to go to a church, synagogue, mosque, though it's nice to, if it's a priest or whoever's giving the sermon is a person that is connected to the divine, to go and be inspired by them. But we can do it ourselves as well. We can connect with the gods. We can connect with the divine, so that we're making our body that temple for the God to come down in and work through us and do divine things. But there is the problem that it could be misused, and you could not invoke the divine. You might invoke some devil or demon, and then you're being a puppet master of the dark forces, which is why we have to be careful about these things and make sure that your heart is in the right place, that your mind knows what it truly wants, because our consciousness affects things, and what we think we put out there, what we wish for comes back. And as they say, be careful what you wish for, which is why this, in these interesting times that we live in of 2020, it's fantastic people are finding their spiritual paths and trying to reconnect to the divine. And I don't know how to, I don't have the advice or the wisdom to say how to make sure it is the divine. I think you have to know in yourselves and what you believe in. I think you will sense whether it's the right thing that you're trying to connect with. You know, we've got to remember that Steiner was saying that, you know, St. Michael is out there to work to destroy the dark forces, but he needs our help. So we need to give our energies back to St. Michael, our good energies, to help fight the dark forces. And maybe we do that ourselves when we ourselves are fighting our own inner demons, as well as any demons that might manage to jump aboard. But that's another subject. But we have to be careful of this kind of thing. We are influenced every day by good and bad forces. So I'm trying to, it's a difficult subject to put across, because I'm not a preacher, but at the same time I want to put forward what these great teachers are trying to tell us. You know, Steiner goes on to say here, people intoned magical words into their breath in Europe and to a lesser extent in Asia Minor, but they didn't take hold of the undifferentiated breath directly. Thereby, the breath or the air streaming in and out of them was taken hold of by magical cultic words. The striving up of magical forces towards divine ones became manifest indirectly in what was spoken into the sacrificial smoke, because he's talking about they were using a smoke to speak into, like if you light a joss stick or a candle, you blow it out, the smoke goes up. Maybe that's the time to put the prayers in so that the smoke goes up to the divine. Maybe the divine likes the smell of incense. Right, so he's talking about in what was spoken into the sacrificial smoke, or directly in what was experienced in the intonation of the magical cultic words. Whenever someone prays, he's basically trying to ascend to divine spiritual regions with his forces. And these people felt that when they intoned magical cultic or prayerful words, they were ascending to a region where they met the gods. So try not to waste your prayers. Sometimes it's difficult to think of what to say in a prayer, because normally most prayers are wishes or hopes, aren't they? Oh, I pray that, you know, I get that nice house, or I pray for health, good health for my family, or something like that. You need to really mean what you want. And if you deserve it, it'll come. But should it be only that makes it a one-way street? You're asking for things. I'm not saying you need to give up your life and dedicate it to God to get what you want, but you should be aware of the divine. You know, your prayers should be thought out and have meaning to them. And specific, I suppose, is the word I'm looking for. When someone intones things, the Godhead becomes manifest and speaks in the cultic words, so that it's not he who is speaking anymore. The Godhead was now revealing itself in the airy element. Man felt that he was in something which controls the forces in the air from his own astral body. So by having that God coming down into you, you know, it must be a very powerful feeling. But it's what we do with it. What do we use it for? Hopefully for good. Hopefully if you wanted to do something like that, it's because you want to do the divine's work. You want to go forward and do, you know, I'm going to say the old new age thing of love and light. But that is what the divine wants, love and light. But then at the same time, we've got the spiritual battle against the dark forces. So in our prayers, you know, we can ask for defense. We can ask to be looked after and protected from the dark forces and not led astray by them. Temptation is, you know, how the dark forces works, and deceit and that kind of way. We want to make our prayers mean something truly to our hearts and our heads. So he's saying about how there's different epochs. This is Steiner again, saying about how people were looking for the path to the real spiritual world. People no longer understood the apocalyptic things which the rites were supposed to make one experience. And he goes on to say that a Christian renewal must occur. You, the priests he was talking to, felt that the religious life of all the confessions and other things that exist in our civilization had become separated from real spiritual things in the real spiritual world. You were looking for the path to the real spiritual world again. And we must remember that Steiner believed the spiritual world was the real world, and this is the, I'm going to say the fake world for want of the better words, because we are all spiritual beings, aren't we? We're all soulful beings, and that is what will live on after our deaths. So we will be going on into that spiritual realm, which is an eternal realm where this earthly life is finite. Let me just find the next thing I wanted to put up. Right, the one who felt that he had been made into a priest by Christ Jesus himself, namely the author of the book we want to study, which is the Apocalypse, so he's talking about John the Divine, was more or less the first to feel that an apocalyptic content merged with his ego, and then only very few people have experienced this since. For it was the astral body which received the echo that I spoke about, where the God gave apocalyptic things as a counter present for words. However, the one who wrote John's Apocalypse felt that his fully conscious ego was united with the content which he had given the Apocalypse. And I'll just add one more sentence that he puts. One day he felt that the ego, which had been completely filled with the significance of the sacred ritual, was now also completely filled with an apocalyptic content. And I do suggest to people that you go and read the book of Apocalypse, the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse. I have put an audio version on my YouTube, because it is an interesting read, and whether you want to believe that it's real or not, it is a great way of looking at yourself and of looking at your own inner demons. But if this is what's going to happen, if this book of Apocalypse is a true revelation that's going to happen, we need to be prepared for it. We need to be spiritual warriors and to hopefully be on the right side, not be deceived by the dark side. We want to be the divine spiritual warriors that help St. Michael slay the dragon.